you've done your pairings, you've got some eggs, they're in the incubator. So now what? So do you know which animals you'll hold back? I mean, even before you see them? Well, we'll discuss some of those things and why they're important in this video. Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Paul with Spheric Reptiles, and I thank you so much for tuning in today. Hey, at Spheric Reptiles, we've been going through a lot of changes. We're moving from the condo to a house. Hopefully, we get to close on the 20th of this month. You know, it's just, we didn't think we needed more space, but when you have snakes, you need a lot more than what you think. You know that we don't have racks right now, just to give you guys a backstory of everything. But when we move, we will be looking to get racks, and that's one of the reasons, because when we talk about time, which is our most valuable assets as humans, or as anything that's living on this planet, right? The racks make things simpler if you're in a breeding project. Now, if you're not, then you can do bioactive, and that's what we do. So our sterile environments are breeding environments. Our bioactives are a little bit sterile, but they're not as much because they have plants, they got isopods, springtails, and they have a reptile in there. But anyway, we're gonna be making that transition. But in the meantime, in between time, we're still pairing up, and we're waiting on like 5 clutches of eggs before the end of the month. So it's kind of like, man, I hope that we get to close on the 20th so that we get the eggs, hopefully it's just going to be a hell of a time trying to figure out the logistics of transferring brand new eggs over to a house that's 25 miles away. So it's a lot. But this video will focus on ball python holdbacks explained, and how it is the future of your breeding project. I mean, what you choose to keep and sell or even try to produce will determine how fast you can move forward for your future. And that doesn't mean you have to buy any more animals. You can work with your existing animals if you've done your planning first and you got the correct animals, as we hopefully you have during this time where animals are very inexpensive. Hopefully you got the key components so that you can even try to create the animals that you want. It is so important for you to choose these holdbacks wisely. And why? Because if you create something that just is new and incredibly wowing to you that someone else is not really creating, then more than likely someone else will feel the exact same as you do. And that's very important for me to say, because sometimes, including myself, well, let me just talk about me. So in our breeding projects, a lot of the times when we're making our heads, I tend to get a little bit like antsy. But remember from the previous video, which is here, I'm working the projects from what I want to make all the way back to the heads and even the initial pairing. So when I look at that animal and I'm getting a little bit discouraged, and we're talking about a holdback here, an animal that meets all of the criteria for me to hold him back, right? It gets a little discouraging until I look at what the finished product could hopefully look like, right? And a lot of the times it hasn't even been created. So you kind of have to take 1 or 2 pictures and put them up there and say, if I combine these two, I can imagine what that would look like. You already know the backstory of why that's important from that previous video as well. But hey man, in choosing these holdbacks, one of the things I don't want you to focus on is money, 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 money. I don't want you to focus on money, because if you do things for money, what you'll end up doing is chasing the status quo, which are what the big breeders are putting out. And no knock on the big breeders, because you don't get to become a big breeder unless you do things successfully. But if you try to chase them and you buy that hatchling from them, you got to realize, man, I mean, this is just business 101. By the time you get that hatchling, they probably have 10 females on an ARS rack. So 10 females that they could possibly be putting 1 or 2 males to crank these animals out. So they're already steps ahead of you before they even give it to you. And some of the breeders out, and if it were me, this is what I would do. I would go ahead and try to produce my visuals of that animal that I'm selling the heads for, just so that I'm always 1 or 2 years ahead of you. So, I mean, that's just something to think about when you're thinking about what projects that you're trying to create and which direction to go. But I'm going to say money should not be your major thing, but focus on it as if this is the most important thing to your breeding project. With each pairing, like you don't really know when they're going to go and when they're not. Sometimes you pair up your animals and they don't go. But, you know, we're going to say that about 75 to 80% of the animals go, right? And what I mean by go is when you put that male with that female, you pair them up maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times, maybe 5 times. That female ends up going through ovulation, laying a clutch of eggs, and those eggs hatch out through the incubator, right? And you get some animals. Yeah, you get some animals. I mean, you're doing all this, you're asking so much of the animals, the male and the female, you put them together, which is great for them because it gives them some enrichment. I mean, sex is an enriching thing, right? So, but you get these animals, and so that is the fruits of your labor. So we want to make sure that investment in that clutch of animals is worth it, right? For moving your breeding project forward. And that's what this is all about. So the money isn't as big of an issue as you creating something that's incredibly wowing and amazing to you that someone else hasn't created, that is flashy. Maybe it's bright, maybe it's dark, but more importantly, it moves your projects forward without you having to backtrack any. So how do you get there? I mean, how do you get there? So you've done your plannings for your animals, right? And you know what you want to create. So I'm going to call this the blueprint. So in the blueprint, you've already planned your breeding pairings and you know what expected animals you should get, right? So that should be number 1 and number 2. Before you start off with anything, know the animals that you're pairing up and know the animals that you can create. Even if you cannot visually identify them, you still need to know what animals that you could create, just writing them out on paper so that you can run that through MorphMarket or the World of Ball Python. I don't even know if that site is up again, or you can run it through other breeders, you know, people that are in the hobby. You can run this through and see if they've seen anything, because sometimes people take photos and they don't post them on MorphMarket, right? That's a given, or you can search the internet and hopefully you can find it. But either way, know your breeding plan from the pairings and from what you should produce. Now, that gives you a lot of power, right? Because a lot of breeders, well, I'm going to say most breeders, because, and I hate to say things like most and always, but the truth of the matter is the 80-20 rule, which is the Pareto principle, holds true to everything. And I mean, we've tried to disprove it, but if you look at the streets that are worked on in your neighborhood or your community, you'll find that the street, if you live on a smaller street that's less traveled, it probably never gets repaired, and you might have potholes. Now, the streets that get traveled on with the greatest amount of traffic, so if we say if 80% of the traffic is on these main streets, you'll find that those streets get worked on a lot more. Well, the same thing holds true for breeders. So 80% of the breeders, I would estimate, don't even plan their holdbacks until they get them, right? So they do the pairings and they're really just shooting for eggs, right? And they know what they're going to get, but they don't think of the holdbacks that they would hold back from that clutch. So when they get them, they're kind of on the edge as to which one they should keep. But what I'm saying is the blueprint should say, you already know which ones that you will keep, because if you've done your homework and you started at the end of the project where you get your wow animal and your initial pairings, then you already know what it takes to get there with the greatest amount of odds that are in your favor, right? So you want to have everything in your favor when you're pairing up and you're breeding animals for a project. And I feel like if you can determine which ones that you want to keep before you even get them, just on paper, if you just write out, if I get these genes, I genetic test it and I get what I want, then this is what I keep. Like without a doubt, this is what I keep. So I think that's the blueprint for success when it comes to this, because that's the whole reason why you should be breeding. I mean, that's my own damn opinion, right? But that's the only reason why you should be breeding, is to make something incredible and new and amazing. And I know I'm stuttering over everything, but I've only had a sip of coffee. And, you know, I just need like, you know, I mean, no lie, like at least 32 ounces of coffee before I can really get started. It doesn't matter if it's Starbucks or if it's out of a Keurig, but I need that because I'm a hyperactive person and I just need this energy, and I just don't have it. I'm like tripping over words. But anyway, so not every clutch will give you a home run. So, you know, that's part of it. Not every clutch is going to give you 100% of everything you pair up. So you pair a het to a het, then you got a 25% chance of getting that visual, and that's just for per gene. So with each gene that you stack on, it's still the same odds. It lowers it down. So if you stack 2 recessive genes that are double het, then it gives you 12.5. And if you're looking for a male or female, it is half of that. So, you know, so those are the odds that you're playing with. If you do a visual to a head, then you got a 50% chance. And of course, if you pair up a visual to a visual, you got a 100% chance, unless they just don't go, right? Unless they just don't lay a clutch of eggs. But you're not going to hit a home run with every clutch. So what happens to the snakes that are not a part of your breeding project? You got these eggs cooking in the incubator, and now you must make a decision. Like, and we've seen decisions before.
In this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join the Miami Heat.
So I think this is a major decision. I mean, if you just really think about it, this is going to be the life's blood of your breeding project's future, right? So in the decision, you're choosing snakes. I mean, it's just that simple. You're choosing snakes. This ain't rocket science, right? This is breeding ball pythons, which is far from the Artemis launch that we just had. This is not rocket science. So you must make a decision on which snakes you should keep. I'm going to say, don't keep the snake that is the prettiest to you. Instead, keep that snake that you already predetermined from that initial pairings that, hey, this is the one that's going to move my project forward. It might not be the prettiest, but it has the genes that you want. And that is a snake that you hold back. We sold snakes that are prettier than our holdbacks, but when we look at the gene expressions and the patterns and the brightness and all this other stuff in our holdbacks, we know that we made good decisions because on paper, it shows that this snake will move us forward with the greatest percentage faster than any other animal that we produce, right? So, and of course, if you don't get the animal that you want, you have to have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. I mean, because the more genes you put in there, the less likely it is that you're going to get what you want. I mean, that's just statistics, right? The more percentages you play with, or the more marbles you put into, or the more gumballs you put into a gumball machine of different colors, the less likely it is that you'll get like the exact one that you want, right? I mean, you might get it, but that's the might and the percentage. And in making your decision, I got some questions that you can ask yourself. So the first one is, does this animal move us forward genetically? So does it move us forward to our project? That's the whole meat and potatoes of this video. Does it move you forward to your project? And if it does, then you keep it. If it doesn't, then you don't. Like, that's the number one question that you should be asking. So remember, we're not trying to build collections. If you're trying to do a project, you're trying to make a project. So just to have more animals isn't necessarily going to help you out realistically when it comes to feeding them all the time. And not to say, look, there's nothing wrong with feeding your animals, because if you breed the animals, either way, you got to feed them. But at the end of the day, when you're choosing which ones are going to be your holdbacks, you want to make sure that that animal moves you forward genetically. The second thing is, does it improve your quality of your animal? So is this an animal that is the best example that you can produce, right? And that part is subjective because it all depends on the quality of your breeding stock, right? So that's why those initial breeding pairings are so important, because if you get the right stock, then you can probably produce the right quality, which satisfies number one as well. It moves your breeding project forward. Now, the third thing is, on this holdback, before you make the decision, then what I want you to do is just realistically look in the mirror, look at the snake, look in the mirror again, look back at the snake, look in the mirror again, look back at the snake. So you're trying to see if in 2 years, will you regret selling this animal, right? So if it's an animal that you're just kind of on the fence that maybe it'll make it, go ahead and sell it. But if it's an animal that you know is genetically strong on paper and it moves your breeding project forward, then, you know, you keep it. If it doesn't satisfy number one, if it doesn't satisfy number two, then when it gets to number three, it should probably be an easy decision, right? I mean, it's not going to be a holdback. One other thing that I really wanted to point out was that, so with your males, you really want to make sure that they're your power spreaders, and the fact that they have the recessive traits that you want. You probably can get the visual examples of the animals that you want, or at least get you 2/3 of the way with the incomplete dominant traits with them for a lot less than you can for your females, which happen to be your longevity of your project. So if you already have the females in place and it takes a while to grow them up, for a lot of you, all this information might be relevant 2 or 2.5 years from now, but you buy those females, buy the best examples that you can buy, and you grow them up so that they are your longevity for your project. So you're not having to buy new females every season. So you start out with your males, which are your powerhouse spreaders, and then your females should be your longevity producers, so that you're not having to regrow them up, so that with each season, you can move your projects forward without having to wait an additional 2 to 2.5 years to grow up a female, right? With your projects, you're going to have to do that anyway as you produce these holdbacks, but at least this way, it will be staggered so that eventually you'll end up at the end of like your first series of holdbacks. You should be moving your projects forward enough to where you can make a decision as to whether you want to make those previous breeder females available to somebody else, or you can just keep them as pets. But either way, their job should be done. You could have gotten everything out of them that you wanted to, and now they can just have a great life. Even though they're all pet quality animals, right? They're just snakes. They don't know their patterns or anything like that. So that's why I treat them all the same. So what separates a good snake from a holdback snake? I mean, what separates a good snake from a holdback snake? So you've already done your planning. You know what you're going to produce. You've kind of written out what you're going to hold back. Now you've held back the animals. You've made your decision. So what determines a good snake from a holdback snake? I mean, if you're trying to just drill down and to just really figure out, how do I choose a holdback? Now I know that I see one that I want, but how do I truly decide on if this animal is a good holdback? Well, it's pretty simple if you really just think about it. When you go to buying a snake, after you buy a couple, then you kind of get educated on what a healthy snake looks like. And that's pretty much what this boils down to. So this is the filter, and the filter is you're determining the health, the growth, and the sex of the animal is going to help you determine which animals make the best holdback. So when I talk about health, we want animals that are eating consistently, right? So if they're eating consistently, they're growing. You really don't want to hold back an animal that is an inconsistent feeder. You want one that's eating consistently. You get them on a good regimen. So when they're a hatchling, they take readily to food. When they're a juvenile, you establish their feeding schedule, whether they're going to be on a 7-day or a 10-day, based on how well and how fast they process the food and make excrement. Now, I'm starting to use that word now, excrement. It sounds so much more professional, right? I don't freaking know. But also the sex of the animal. So whether you need males or females, maybe you have 3 males that are ready to go for your project and you already have them tiered as to which one you'll be pairing up with each group of holdbacks. But whether you need males or females, that should help determine which animals you hold back. I mean, just not to hold back 15 males over the course of a year just because they have the traits and you have no female holdbacks. I don't know if that really makes sense. But that's in the plan that you create. I can't make your plan for you, but as you make it, that's one of the things to consider. Also one of the things that I've really looked into, and this is what really helps me to determine, like other than the other two, those are the priority. But the one that really makes that decision for me as to which animals I hold back is, as I stack genes into this snake, whether they're incomplete dominant or they're recessive, does it muddy the pattern out? Or does it continue to make a pattern clear, bright, high contrasting, otherwise not a brown snake? So I'm not trying to make a breeding project to make brown snakes when they're adults. So I know that most animals look great when they're hatchlings, but my target is what will this animal look like as an adult? And if it looks spectacular as an adult, then that's one of the things that helps me determine what my breeding project will be. So it's the health of the animal. So whether it eats, grows, does all this thing, I can get it established. The sex of the animal is number 2 for me. And then the trait stacking ability of the genes that I'm putting into play with the pattern. I think that that's monumental, because as you're making this project, the last thing I want for any of us to do is to be heading forward and we're in year 3 or year 4 or maybe even year 5 and we're just that close. And then we put in that last gene and we end up with a brown snake. I mean, I think that would be horrible. I mean, that would be so deflating to me. So I can only imagine that it would be deflating to you as well. So remember the wow factor. That's what we're trying to do, is make something new, something that's wonderful or wow inspiring. And, I think that pretty much helps. But what about snakes that don't make the cut? I mean, you're breeding this project to produce animals to move you forward. And now you know which animals you'll hold back. You got a criteria written out. But what's the exit strategy for the animals that you don't want to keep? Now, this is important. So I'm not saying get rid of unhealthy animals. If an animal is unhealthy, you did it, you keep it. I mean that. Now, if you produce an animal that's not feeding, Don't pass that animal on to someone else as a pet or a breeder, knowing dang well that that animal is not eating. I'm saying don't do it because it's not fair to that buyer. It's not fair. It's not fair. And I think that that's the wrong thing to do. And if your animal is truly not healthy, seek medical attention, and in worst case scenarios, euthanize the animal, because this whole thing of breeding, the same thing that goes with any animals that are bred, is that we're trying to get the best examples to move forward. We're not trying to make weaker examples of the animals just to have the animals. So that's the number one thing. Do not pass off an unhealthy animal. So make sure that even if it's not a holdback, that the animal is feeding, that it's healthy, that you've identified the sex, and to the best of your ability that you've identified all of the genetic patterns, so incomplete, dominant, and recessive patterns that the animal might have, just so, and even if it's a pet, that the person knows what they're getting, but more importantly for the breeder, that they don't have to spend that extra money trying to figure out what the animal is. I mean, unless they're like me and they're going to get a genetic tested to confirm the findings anyway. I would advise you to do the same thing too, because at least you have two sources. So if they give you a source and then you actually verify that source, or maybe you find additional traits for that source, for those traits, then, you know, it can't hurt. Like, you've already chosen the animal, so why not see if it has additional traits or just to confirm what it has. Now, that part is out, like the health and then identifying and doing all this other stuff. So they're not on your starting team and they're on the bench and you choose to sell them, but that doesn't mean that they won't work as good breeders for someone else or good pets for someone else. So that's when you got to make the decision as to how you will sell them. So that's a platform issue. So you're either going to go and sell them at expos, or you'll sell them on MorphMarket, or you'll just sell them some other way through social media. Maybe you'll use Instagram, maybe you'll use YouTube. Whatever you use, you got to come up with a way so that you're not building a collection from these other animals that don't move your projects forward. Because more than likely, if you're breeding animals, then you already are at what you would call your limit. Maybe you have a little bit more space, but you really don't want to just be feeding more animals. And when you add those holdbacks, that will be more animals. So what I'm always trying to do, and the reason I say that, just to fair balance everything, is I don't want you to get burnout, right? And that's one of the things that happened to me when I first kept reptiles, just from having a lot of big reptiles. I got burnt out. So, but the good thing is that I got burnt out at the right time. So in the early 2000s, the mid 2000s, where all of the reptile hobby was beginning to explode. So it was very easy for me to sell my animals. That exit strategy still works, guys. You got to give people healthy animals. You have to, as the exit strategy, decide on whether you're going to try to sell this animal as a pet or to breeders. And the reason I say that is because it chooses who you're going to try to market to. So if you're looking for just like the pet quality, then do expos. If you're looking for breeders, then choose MorphMarket. But either way, I think you still need some social media, whether it's Instagram to show off your snakes, maybe it's Facebook to show off your snakes as well as YouTube to show off your snakes, TikTok, or whatever social media platform you choose to use. But man, I hope that this video helped you in just realizing that your holdbacks are your future and how to choose which holdbacks to hold back. Man, you know, I really love creating these videos for you. And in doing so, it gives me a video record for my family for the future, so they can look and see what the hell I was doing with all my time when they thought I was just living in a house with snakes running everywhere or crawling everywhere. But either way, guys, hey, thank you for watching this video. If this is the type of content that you feel is helpful, hit that like button, maybe subscribe to it. But more importantly, I'm interested in your comments, because I found that the comments help me just as much as I feel like they are helping someone else. So with that being said, guys, hey, enjoy that time that you spend with your reptiles, and definitely cherish that time that you spend with your family. Thank you.